Did you know? Lots and lots of games are always coming out, like all the time. Seriously, I get too many press releases in my inbox to look at all of them, and oftentimes when I do, I'm just reminded that most games that get made are usually shit. But of course we wouldn't know that if there weren't good games to compare the bad ones to. So with that in mind, I wanted to give some exposure to a few interesting games from my inbox. The sole rule, the caveat, the catch here, is that they're games that I have not seen any mention of anywhere else on the internet, just in my inbox. So the little PAX preview snippet I saw about vertiginous golf means it doesn't count. But that's a pretty dangerous idea, right? If these games haven't gotten any exposure, there might be a reason behind that. Ultimately, the novelty value might not extend past the price point. The production values are usually dirt cheap, and, well, if people have been ignoring them, then maybe they're just not that exciting to begin with. But I feel like these games deserve more exposure, and fortunately I'm not too worried about my first choice, because I think this one is a pretty safe bet. I've been eagerly awaiting an English language version of this game for months, and now that one's finally out, no one cares. Which is a shame, because this might actually be one of my favorite games of this year. It's a dazzling light show, a dizzying flight show, and also a demanding test of planning, reacting, and adapting to innovative shmup mechanics that add hours of a satisfying learning curve to a fairly basic, understandable twist. You press the trigger buttons to rotate the world around you. On top of having all the awesome music, the polished gameplay, and the sheer spectacle similar to the best shmups out there, Revolver 360 has you playing this 2D game three-dimensionally. You use that rotational axis to move bullets out of your way, to herd enemies into close groups, to scope out healing items hidden in the background, or to blast away obstacles hurling at you from the background. It's a lot to take in. There's a lot going on everywhere, in every direction, and that's before you get into the more advanced techniques that have you exploiting scores and healing item spawn rates. It has that difficult and rewarding anti-tactical approach to high-level play that you see in a lot of competitive Japanese games. The most rewarding strategies are the ones that put you at the most risk. You can shoot different colored bullets with two different kinds of alt fires, and the hits count towards your score. So since enemies fire more bullets when they're closer to death, you have to chain up hits of both near-death enemies and their bullets together to keep the scoring multiplier high. So in that case, you actually want to use the rotational axis to move bullets into your way. Also, enemies you shoot while they're firing a laser roll a higher chance to drop a healing item. The most skilled replays you see, which the tutorial actually encourages you to watch, reveal that the optimal strategy involves keeping enemies alive and shooting at you. It's crazy. I love it. I love the way this game looks and sounds. I love just sitting back and taking it all in, and I also love leaning into it to try my hardest to do my best. You can take a few hits, but you have only one life to make it to the end of a 40-minute or so run, and the process of getting there is an incredibly satisfying struggle that takes hours. I love this game. I think it's amazing, and I think a lot of people out there need to give it a shot. Elliot Quest is a big fat Zelda homage that actually gets Zelda right. An overworld map full of dungeons, caves, random enemy encounters, and friendly villages turns into a series of side-scrolling Twitch stages to make tribute to what I've always thought was the most underrated of the series, Zelda 2: Adventure of Link. I'm not usually a fan of fan-made games that are this derivative, but in this case Elliot Quest actually scratched an itch I never knew I had. Probably because there's always been a surprising lack of honest-to-God Zelda clones flooding the market. I mean, what else do we have? Darksiders? Rambo on the NES? Adventure Time? Elliot Quest is not subtle about the Zeldas. You know where they got that smoke swirl from, and that noise the bosses make when you hit them. But I can't fault it if it still captures the spirit of what made Zelda so loved in the first place, which it does. It's a tantalizing series of secrets and challenges that oftentimes have game-changing abilities hidden behind them. A dark cave, a never-ending forest, or an obligatory themed dungeon will all invoke the mystique they should. There are things you'll come across in the early game that won't make one lick of sense until hours later, and there are incredibly difficult branches away from the main path that just beg you to eventually overcome them later. Those are the tenets of old Zelda games that the newer ones forgot, and that's why I'm surprised this game didn't make much of a splash after launch. It's hardly polished though. A lot of weird glitches and a kind of underdeveloped aesthetic might explain why I never heard of this outside of my inbox. Neons is what would happen if Descent's combat was placed inside a sandbox economy that more resembles Sid Meier's Pirates. It's a fast-paced, highly responsive flight combat game where you zip around this quest world-looking place to grind your way to a bigger, faster ship by blowing up other ships, just mainly for the fun of the combat. There's no story that you don't make up yourself, no tutorial or contextualization beyond a hell of a lot of tooltips and a few minor suggestions that the pause menu gives you. That's the big strength and the weakness of Neon Excesses. It's a modular platform for flight combat whose controls and physics are done really, really well, but you have to be dedicated to figuring out the complexity of it all while also kind of making your own fun with it. You've got a really complicated upgrade system, faction interplay, different kinds of currency to juggle around, and just an overwhelming amount of player choice. The ship's HUD is fully interactive, the colors of the textures are customizable, there are menus everywhere for everything, and it has an open-world ARPG approach to progression that could keep you playing this forever. And what really cements the old-school freeform nature of it all is how you technically don't even have to engage in the combat at all to level up. There are quests, a lot of which are pacifist delivery missions that give you a little payout. You're probably not going to want to rely on those, but they're there. The features, they just go on and on and on. And that's incredibly impressive for a one-man effort whose game I've only seen inside my inbox. Neocolonialism is an unapologetically Marxist strategy game, and that's not me, by the way. That's what the subject line for their press release says. It's like a board game version of Civ crossed with Texas Hold'em, where every design decision was made to make a scathing critique of the bourgeoisie. Even the inverted map that emphasizes the size of the global south fits the theme and the message. Neocolonialism has players taking the role of 1%er bankers who buy and sell political influence to exploit the world's economies in their favor. Note how your currency isn't dollars, it's capital. Whoever liquidates their capital well enough to have the biggest secret Swiss bank account at turn 12 wins, while the rest of the world's economy is left ruined. There's a lot of convoluted backstabbing and conspiring that this game intends players to do. You stake your claim to the potential capital of regional economies by buying votes in those regions, so they'll elect you as prime minister. But since it takes a few turns for elections, you have to make sure you're buying votes only at the right places at the right times. And if there are no other players buying votes in your region, you're considered a dictator, which triggers rolls for military coups that can instantly take away all your votes and put other players in that region. So you need competition over a region to safely accumulate capital, or at least the facade of competition, since after all, there can be only one winner. That juggling of both cooperative and competitive tactics is really visible during the investment phase at the beginning of every turn, where players take turns sliding their chips into or out of each other's regions, either to buy influence towards their favor, or to sell it all to trigger a dictatorship, or to trick the other players into investing where they shouldn't. Its mechanics are kind of brilliant. They make for hilarious black humor and also a sinister, nasty, quick little game of bluffing and backstabbing. At the very least, it's interesting to play a game that openly, explicitly, and very intentionally bakes politics into its mechanics. But I think a lot of us know how popular that idea is right now. Maybe that's why I've only seen it in my inbox. Or maybe it's because the production values are dirt cheap, but really having it any other way would kind of be missing the point, wouldn't it? The interface looks only as good as it needs to, and you're going to be looking at this very same map through the entirety of the game. It has an online mode, but it's a ghost town right now, and maybe forever. But regardless, I laughed my ass off playing a few hours with the AI, and I'd also be really eager to see what this game plays like with actual human beings. But if that were to actually happen, then I'd guess it and these other games would have to reach a wider audience than just my inbox.